Vacate immediately. The notice was taped across our door like a final verdict. Thick, block print, red marker, initialed at the bottom, Grant Tisdale, HOA president. I didn't need to finish reading it. The moment I saw his name, I knew this was personal. "You've had months to comply," Grant said, stepping back with that smug half smile. He stood on our front porch like he owned the deed. "We've been generous, but Melissa's continued noncompliance leaves us no choice." I didn't flinch. "Melissa owns this home." He shrugged. "And she's bound by HOA rules. You're not even listed on our registry. As far as the board is concerned, you're a long-term guest violating policy." I let the silence stretch between us for a beat. "You're standing 2 feet into Ridgemont Township," I said. "And I'm the guy who helped design the overlay maps you never bothered to check." His smirk faltered, but only for a second. "Where are you watching from? Because if you've ever seen an HOA weaponize a rulebook, you'll want to subscribe right now." What they did next? No one was ready for that. "My name is Marcus Bell," I said, not for his sake, but for everyone else watching from across the street. "I'm a licensed civil engineer. I've worked on municipal zoning systems for 17 years. And this house, my wife inherited it from her father. She was born here. We were married under that oak tree you threatened to cut. That cast iron boundary marker in our yard. It's not just ornamental. It marks where Oakwood City ends and Ridgemont begins. The HOA's power ends right at it, though no one had bothered to measure. But Grant didn't care about lines. He cared about power. When Melissa's father passed, Grant's son Ethan made an unsolicited cash offer on the house. Melissa declined, obviously. We had just buried her father. This wasn't some vacant lot. It was his legacy. His fingerprints are on the brickwork. 3 months later, the letters started. Unauthorized vehicle. Untrimmed hedges. Non-member occupancy. Grant signed everyone, and each time, the fine amount crept higher. But it wasn't about violations. It was about leverage. The home sits on the corner lot. Quiet, shaded, surrounded by old trees. The last non-renovated house on a street full of synthetic stucco and vinyl fencing. I still remember the day we moved in. Melissa put her hand on that old marker and whispered, "He left this for me." So when Grant stepped closer again, hands folded like he'd already won, something in me snapped. "You can't evict us," I said. "You're not protected," he replied. "I'm not governed," I said flatly. We stood eye to eye then. No fence, no mediator. Just a man protecting his family and another trying to erase someone else's roots. Behind him, HOA board members shuffled awkwardly on the sidewalk. One of them, Amy Rourke, avoided eye contact. Her arms were crossed, jaw tight. She didn't speak, but something in her posture told me she didn't agree with this. Not entirely. Grant noticed her hesitation too. "You'll be hearing from our legal team," he added, backing away. "I'm looking forward to it," I said. After they left, Melissa came to the door, fingers trembling over the edge of the paper. She didn't cry. She never cried when they did this. But I saw her eyes linger on the marker, her father's marker, like it might disappear if she blinked. "We're not leaving," I told her. "Not now, not ever." She nodded slowly, then reached down and peeled the paper off the door, folded it once, then again, until it was a tight, hard square. She handed it to me, wordless. I slipped it into my pocket. It wouldn't be the last. I didn't sleep that night. Melissa sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone like it might light up with good news. It didn't. We'd both seen this coming, just not like this. Not so boldly, not so public. By morning, the HOA app was already showing the violation. Failure to comply with occupancy regulation 12B. Fine, $2,200, due in 72 hours. A new checkbox now appeared under our household status. Final notice issued. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Maple Oak Reserve digital board archive. The recent entries were loaded with vague terms: resident disturbances, ongoing non-compliance, board consensus. No detail, no minutes posted, no vote logs, just decisions. Grant's decisions. Melissa leaned over my shoulder. "They didn't even name me." "They never do," I said. "It's a pattern. They sanitize the entries so they can't be held accountable." On a hunch, I checked the neighborhood group chat. It wasn't official, but it was where most of the community's real business happened. The gossip, the backyard politics, the shifting loyalties. It was alive with polite outrage and passive support. Another family targeted. How is this okay? Didn't they just try this with the Singhs? Maybe if she paid the fines, they'd leave them alone. And there it was, slipped in between polite empathy and cowardly shrugs. The doubt. The implication that we were the problem, that we weren't maintaining the image the neighborhood demanded. They always talk like this, Melissa said softly. Like we're unclean, like the house is diseased. They think they're preserving something, I muttered. But all they're preserving is control. Later that morning, I drove through the subdivision. It was a Saturday, quiet, sun cutting between the vinyl fences and artificial turf. House after house matched the same aesthetic. Gray trim, beige stone, one species of tree in each front yard. Manufactured beauty. Except our house. Ours was different. Old brick, blue shutters faded from real sunlight. A porch swing that groaned like a memory. And that cast iron marker by the sidewalk. The one with rust carved in like age rings. I passed it every morning, and I passed it again now, slowing the car just slightly, eyes tracking the line it drew between where the HOA claimed to rule and where the township actually began. That marker was older than any board member on record. I parked near the community playground and watched as Grant strutted across the lot toward the clubhouse. He waved at a couple walking their labradoodle. The man smiled. The woman looked away. Inside the clubhouse, the blinds were drawn, but I knew the layout well. Meeting room on the right, storage on the left. And, according to the archive blueprints I'd reviewed last year for a city water upgrade, an unsealed access vent behind the kitchen wall. Nothing major, just a ventilation gap. But enough to let sound through. I parked myself on a bench near the side wall and waited. At exactly 11 now a.m., a few more board members trickled in. Amy among them. She walked slower than the others. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, like she was holding tension in her scalp. I wasn't close enough to hear words, but I could see the shapes of things. Amy's arms crossed. Grant standing, always standing. A finger pointed. Then that same finger dropped to the table like a gavel. Decisions were being made. I pulled up the live access portal again. The violation had already increased. Delinquency processing scheduled. A new tag. Board escalation vote authorized. They're fast-tracking it, I whispered. Melissa texted me at that moment. They just blocked our gate code. The HOA had full control of gate access permissions. Melissa's name was in the system. Mine was never listed. I closed the app and stared down at the clubhouse. They were going to push us out, piece by piece, not with force, but with bureaucracy, with fines, with access denial, with shame. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't even about the house. It was about making sure no one like us, anyone who didn't bend, anyone who asked questions, could stay. The line they drew through the neighborhood wasn't just on the map. It was in their minds, and I was about to erase it. The next meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, and this time, I wasn't watching from a bench. I was in the room, not as a member, not as a participant, just as a husband sitting quietly in the back corner, arms crossed, eyes open. No one said I couldn't be there, and no one dared ask me to leave. Melissa had received the notice personally this time, hand-delivered by one of Grant's lackeys. They used legal phrasing to make it sound final. Failure to remove unauthorized occupant within 10 days will result in formal lien assessment. They didn't use my name, just unauthorized occupant. They still thought erasing a name erased a person. Grant opened the meeting with the usual pleasantries, calling it routine maintenance of community standards. He scanned the room with that politician's smirk, but it faltered when his eyes passed over me. He nodded once. I didn't nod back. Amy Rourke sat 3 seats to his left, hair down this time, glasses lower on her nose. Her hands were folded in her lap, but the tips of her fingers pressed together like she was holding something invisible between them. She didn't look at Grant. She didn't look at me either. But when Melissa's name came up, her lips parted slightly, just enough to inhale. But she didn't speak. Grant was already moving on. We have 3 compliance escalations on record, 1 unresolved guest occupancy issue. As per Article 9, the board is authorized to levy penalties and file a municipal complaint if corrective action is not taken. That's when I spoke. Are you claiming this house falls within Maple Oak Reserve jurisdiction? All heads turned. Grant hesitated. "Sir, you're not on the agenda." "I'm asking a clarifying question. Are you claiming legal jurisdiction over our property?" He forced a smile. "As outlined in the amended charter, all homes within the gates of the community are subject to the same compliance regulations." "Then you've read the annexation maps?" A pause. I didn't wait. "Because I have. And if you had, you'd know that Block 217A, our block, was never included in the final jurisdictional overlay during the Oakwood-Ridgemont redistricting 26 years ago." Amy looked up sharply. Her fingers twitched, pressing harder. Grant's jaw shifted, but he said nothing. I didn't press further. Not yet. I just leaned back in my seat and let the room take in the silence. After the meeting adjourned, I moved toward the door. Amy was packing up slowly, head down, meticulous with her papers. I waited. "You know he's wrong," I said quietly. She glanced up, then back down. "I don't want to be involved," she whispered, almost too low to hear. "You already are." Her fingers paused. "They won't believe you, even if you're right." "They don't have to. The zoning commission will." Amy finally looked me in the eye. Her pupils darted, uncertain, but not unkind. There was something else there, something pulled taut between fear and regret. "He's pushing this too far," she said, still barely audible. "At first it was about image. Now it's personal. He thinks if he pressures Melissa enough, she'll sell. She won't." "I know." I waited, but she said nothing more, just gathered her folder and moved toward the exit. But as she passed me, she stopped. "I keep minutes," she said. "Real ones, not the edited versions Grant posts." She didn't look at me as she said it. "They're not in the system." Then she left. I stood there for a while, letting the weight of it settle. The crack had formed. Grant still had the room, but Amy had the truth, and the truth was starting to leak. When I got home, Melissa was sitting on the porch swing, arms around her knees, staring at the marker. She didn't speak. I sat beside her. "They voted again?" she asked. "Yeah." "And?" "They think they're going to break you." Her smile was tired but defiant. "They'll get splinters." A breeze stirred the leaves above us. Somewhere nearby, a gate clicked shut. The night settled in, quiet but charged. We weren't alone anymore, and the board didn't know it yet. 2 days later, our trash bins disappeared. Not overturned, not moved down the road. Gone. Melissa walked the curb 3 times before saying anything, double-checking the neighbors' driveways. No one had seen a thing. No one ever did. I filed a missing property report with the city just to document it, though I knew exactly where they went. The same day, our gate code failed again. This time, Melissa was stuck outside for 40 minutes until a neighbor coming home from work let her in. "They're trying to wear us down," she said as she stepped through the door, sunburned and sweating. "It's like they're shaving away our right to live here 1 inch at a time." She wasn't wrong. I checked the HOA portal again that night. Another fine. Improper waste bin storage. 350s, due immediately. They fined us for bins they took. Across the street, a neighbor named Harold, who always pretended not to notice anything, waved half-heartedly as he pulled weeds from his flower bed. I caught the flicker in his eyes when he glanced toward our house. The same flicker I'd seen for weeks now. Pity mixed with calculation. He wasn't choosing sides. He was waiting to see who'd win. The next day, I pulled into the HOA visitor lot behind the clubhouse. I wasn't there for a meeting. I had my tablet, my stylus, and a rolling cart of blueprints I kept for work. On the passenger seat, the hard copy of the original zoning overlays rested in a plastic sleeve. Maple Oak Reserve was technically designed to be part of a larger city expansion plan, but due to a delayed annexation on the Ridgemont side, some parcels were never formally incorporated into the HOA charter. That included our home, and 5 others on our block. None of this would have mattered if Grant hadn't decided to weaponize his ignorance. I wasn't just guessing. I'd seen the signatures myself. I had the archive filings. The boundary line ran 26 inches past the edge of our property, ending at the exact center of the cast iron marker. That marker wasn't decorative. It was legal, and if I could prove that it marked the boundary, not the gates, not the sidewalks, not the assumption of control the board liked to wave around, then everything Grant had done would collapse under its own weight. Still, proving it wouldn't be enough. I needed it recognized. I rolled my cart into a public planning office across town the following morning. It was a quiet beige building with fluorescent lighting and a dusty American flag in the corner. Not dramatic, not political, just old, honest process. "Do you have an appointment?" the clerk asked. "Not yet," I said, laying out the zoning overlays. "But I think your office has been operating on a 26-year-old mistake." 2 hours later, a supervisor named Daniels stood at the table with a ruler and 2 maps. He adjusted his glasses 3 times while comparing the digitized HOA filings with the official city overlays. "This parcel," he tapped it twice, "was never added to the HOA charter under Ridgemont. Oakwood processed it, but the county never finalized the joint record, which means—" He stopped. "It means my property isn't under their jurisdiction," I finished. Daniels didn't smile. Government workers never did when things went sideways. Instead, he just nodded once. "You'll want to file a boundary clarification request. Could take a few weeks to process, but you're right. If this holds, their authority ends at the old line, including enforcement, fines, even gate restrictions." I thanked him, gathered the files, and walked back into the heat of the day. My phone buzzed. Melissa had sent a picture. It was Grant standing by our mailbox with a clipboard, flanked by 2 board members. Amy was not among them. They were measuring. Again. I stared at the photo for a long time, then zoomed in. Grant's hand was resting on the marker, his fingers curling over it like he already owned it, like he could erase it with enough signatures. I closed the image and opened the official request form on my tablet, tapped in my name, my license, attached the maps. I wasn't going to argue anymore. I was going to prove it. I submitted the boundary clarification request by noon and received confirmation from the county within the hour. It wasn't approval, that would take weeks, but it was logged, time-stamped, assigned a case number. That alone changed everything. Because from that moment on, the HOA was operating under active legal review. Any fines issued now could be challenged later as invalid. Any action they took could be turned against them. Melissa read the confirmation twice, then set her phone down like it was something fragile. "They won't stop just because we're right," she said. "I know," I replied, "but now I'm not just their problem, I'm the county's." We spent the afternoon quietly. She tended to the garden bed out front, hands deep in the earth her father had tilled for decades. I stayed inside, comparing parcel histories with the updated charter records. The more I read, the worse it got. Grant's amendments to the HOA charter over the past 3 years were full of contradictions. Language borrowed from unrelated districts, vague legal terminology, and boundary descriptions copied from outdated templates. It was all cosmetic. No legal precision, no official verification. He'd never filed a proper boundary adjustment request through the city because he assumed the gates themselves were authority. Enough. But gates don't overrule municipal boundaries. Still, assumption is a powerful weapon. And Grant had used it well. That evening, I opened a weathered folder I'd kept tucked between other work files. A copy of the old township zoning sketches Melissa's father had shown me once, back when he was alive. They weren't official documents, just personal notes and measurements he'd taken over the years, annotated in pencil and ink, sometimes even in fading highlighter. In one corner, a notation in his shaky handwriting, "Boundary confirmed 1996. Never filed." He'd known. He knew they'd try to take it one day. He just didn't think it would be so soon. As I sat there tracing the lines he'd drawn, I heard movement outside. The front gate creaked open, a car door shut, slow footsteps on gravel. I stood, moved to the window. Amy Rourke. She wasn't dressed like usual, no board attire, no clipboard. Just a light jacket, a folder clutched tightly in one hand, and a look like she hadn't slept. Melissa opened the door before I could reach it. Amy didn't ask to come in. She just stepped forward and handed me the folder. "I'm not supposed to have these," she said. Inside were 3 sets of board meeting minutes, real ones. Not the edited summaries posted online, but the full transcriptions, notes in the margins, votes recorded, motions seconded, even when they failed. On the 3rd page, a line stood out. President Tisdale acknowledges jurisdictional discrepancy, but insists on proceeding for consistency. I looked up. He knew. Amy nodded. He didn't care. Who else saw this? No one outside the board, and not all of them understand what it means. Grant kept saying the lines were symbolic. They're not. She sighed. I wanted to say something. I tried. But every time he spoke, it was like, if you didn't agree out loud, you became the next target. Melissa stepped beside me, arms crossed. You're saying he'd do this to you? Amy hesitated. Then, he already has. She turned to leave, but paused on the porch. I'm not brave, she said. But you are. And I'm tired of letting people like him win. She left before we could thank her. I sat down at the dining table and spread out everything. The zoning overlays, the marker photos, the charter discrepancies, and now Amy's notes, proof that the board moved forward in full knowledge of their own lack of authority. It was no longer a question of whether we were right. It was about what came next, because now, for the first time, we weren't just defending our home. We were preparing to expose them. I cleared the dining table that night, cleared it like I used to when we were remodeling foundation grids. Everything in neat columns, edges aligned, categories marked. Melissa watched from the hallway, arms folded, her expression unreadable. I wasn't just organizing paperwork. I was laying out a map of their mistake. Amy's folder had cracked it open, but I needed more than evidence. I needed a method, a plan they couldn't sidestep. No yelling, no arguing, just a rope they'd already wrapped around their own necks. I started with the HOA's original incorporation documents, then the Ridgemont Township's unfinalized filings, each map layered on top of the next, like sediment, showing decades of missed filings and shortcuts. I highlighted the gap, traced the boundary line that cut clean through our yard and landed just beyond the cast iron marker. Then I matched it to the zoning ordinance overlays I'd collected for work. By the third hour, I had a 6-inch binder that no board member would be able to refute. At the front of it, I slid in Amy's meeting minutes, flagged with a tab labeled Intentional Misconduct. Melissa joined me just before midnight. She set 2 mugs on the table, mine black, hers chipped white, and looked at the stack without speaking. The house was silent except for the ceiling fan and the distant hum of tires on wet asphalt. I filed a county claim for fine reversal, I said, based on jurisdictional error. They'll take a few days to respond, but it's logged now. Official. Her eyes stayed on the binder. And if they try to speed things up before then? They'll be doing it with an open file under investigation. Any lien file now becomes a liability. Melissa nodded, then reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a small, square object, the folded notice, the first one Grant had taped to our door. She hadn't thrown it away. I unfolded it, smoothed the creases, and set it next to the binder. This is the last thing they handed us, she said. Let it be the first thing we hand back. The next morning, I called a zoning official I knew from a highway corridor project 3 years back. Frank Holman, soft-spoken, precise, the kind of man who never missed a measurement. I emailed him the overlay discrepancies, highlighted the unfiled parcels, and included a screenshot of the HOA's portal listing our home as within charter jurisdiction. He responded in under an hour. This needs a field validation. I'll assign a site visit request. That was enough. Once a county validation team got involved, Grant wouldn't be able to backpedal without exposure. If he kept pushing, the violation would flip on him. By noon, I stood in our driveway, reviewing the field request logs on my tablet when Harold crossed the street. The same neighbor who'd been cautiously neutral all along. He scratched the back of his neck. Saw the board out here again yesterday, measuring things. I know, I said. He nodded at the binder under my arm. You building something? No, I replied. I'm correcting something. He shifted uncomfortably. They've been saying things about you, that you're trying to undermine the whole HOA. They're not wrong, I said, but only because the HOA's pretending it governs something it doesn't. He didn't answer, just stared at the cast iron marker. My grandfather helped pour that, took 2 men and a borrowed crane to set it. I glanced over. That marker's still standing. He looked down. Not much else from back then is. He walked off without another word, but he didn't look away this time. Back inside, I printed 5 letters addressed to the homeowners on our block, those same 5 parcels that sat in the same jurisdictional blind spot as ours. I didn't accuse, I didn't rant, I just laid out the boundary history, the annexation oversight, and the county validation request number. If they wanted to know whether the HOA really governed their homes, they had the tools now. That afternoon, I walked the block and placed each letter in a mailbox by hand. It wasn't just about us anymore. The line Grant drew in his head was about to get redrawn by the very people he'd overlooked. The county field validation was still pending, but now I had something stronger: Amy's confession and her evidence. The binder was no longer a theory, it was a ledger, and every page stacked weighed against Grant's claims. I made copies of everything: the transcripts, the boundary maps, the amended charter language, and the emails Amy had forwarded after our conversation. She hadn't said a word when she sent them. Just the files. But that was enough. Melissa helped me assemble the packets, 5 sets, each labeled, each tabbed, each ready. We didn't talk much while we worked. There was a strange calm between us, like we were finally doing something that could fight back. And the silence wasn't hesitation anymore. It was focus. By Tuesday morning, I had scheduled delivery meetings with the 5 homeowners from our block, one by one. Casual, not formal gatherings, just neighbors talking at their kitchen counters or backyard fences. The first was Harold. He invited me into his garage, which smelled like old oil and lemon wipes. He poured 2 glasses of lemonade and leaned on the workbench while I laid the map between us. "This is the original annexation overlay," I said. "Here's the HOA charter boundary, here's your property, and here's the marker your grandfather helped install." He stared down at the lines like they were roads he forgot existed. "This whole block," I continued, "was never properly filed under the HOA. They assumed authority. They never had it." Harold looked up slowly. "And now? Now they've issued fines, attempted code enforcement, and threatened a lien on a house they don't legally govern, and not just mine." He said nothing for a long moment, then picked up the packet and tapped it against his palm. "You're not bluffing." "No." "Good." He pointed to the old drill press beside us. "You know why that's still here?" I shook my head. "Because I didn't let them tell me what was visually disruptive. And if this holds up, I'd like to see the look on Grant's face when he finds out I was never his to fine." I met with the other 4 that week. 2 were hesitant. 1 was furious. 1 was scared. But all of them took the folders. All of them promised to look closer. And 3 of them said the same thing before I left. "If this is true, we want him out." I didn't need a mutiny. I needed a moment. On Thursday, Amy texted me. "Meeting tomorrow. Final vote scheduled. They're pushing a lien for your property." She didn't send anything else. But the message was enough. They were accelerating, and they had no idea they were walking directly into a contradiction they'd created. Melissa printed 3 more copies of the packet. I checked the timestamps on the emails, re-verified the zoning file numbers, and added a short summary at the front. A 2-paragraph explanation of why the board's jurisdictional overreach could not only be reversed, but penalized. By the time the HOA meeting began Friday night, we were ready. I walked into the room 5 minutes early, binder under one arm, Amy's transcripts in my coat pocket. Amy was already seated, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed into her tablet. She didn't look at me, but her shoulders dipped when I passed her, like she was letting go of something she'd been carrying alone. Grant took his usual spot at the front, confident, dismissive, certain. He tapped the folder on the table. "We'll begin with the vote to approve formal lien filing against the Bell residents for non-compliance with 12B occupancy regulations and payment delinquency." "Before you vote," I said, stepping forward, "you should review this." I handed the packets to each board member, one by one. Grant reached for his, but I held it for half a second longer. "This isn't a defense," I said. "It's a correction." He looked at me like I was already a ghost, but this time I wasn't standing alone. Amy closed her tablet and looked up. "For the record," she said, voice steady, "we were warned." And just like that, the air shifted. The room didn't erupt. It sagged, like air being sucked out of a balloon too slowly to pop. Grant didn't speak for several seconds. He stared at Amy as though her voice had misfired, like a machine glitching in real time. When he did finally react, it wasn't with anger. It was with dismissal. "We've reviewed the boundaries in the past," he said too calmly. "Nothing substantial came of it. I'll remind the board that jurisdictional assumptions are common in multi-parcel HOAs." I stepped forward again. "This isn't an assumption. It's a matter of public record. County zoning has already accepted my clarification request and logged a site review. The 5 properties on this street, including mine, are not and never have been legally governed by this HOA. Grant waved a hand like he was shooing away smoke. A review isn't a ruling, he said. We've acted in good faith. The board can't be expected to halt governance every time someone files a paperwork objection. Amy lifted her head. This one wasn't just paperwork. Grant narrowed his eyes. Amy didn't flinch. You told us in last quarter's executive meeting that you were aware of the boundary discrepancy. You said it didn't matter, that it wasn't worth splitting hairs. Murmurs started in the room, low but immediate, board members whispering, eyes bouncing between Amy and Grant. The kind of unease that came when control stopped feeling inevitable. I pulled out my tablet and cast the screen to the projector behind me. Up came the zoning map, parcel overlays, historical boundaries. The scanned page of the 1996 Township Charter that omitted our cul-de-sac from HOA registration. Then came the kicker, the screenshot from the HOA portal listing our property with an asterisk and no official parcel match. Grant Tisdale filed the last 3 amendments without filing reciprocal documentation with the county clerk. That means your revised jurisdiction never existed beyond this room. You've been governing land that doesn't belong to you. A pin could have dropped on the carpet. I let it sit. Then I switched the slide. These are the 5 other homes impacted. I've spoken to each of them. They've received fines, access restrictions, and at least one has had guest codes revoked without legal authority. Harold stood from the back of the room. That was me. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Grant closed his binder too slowly, like buying time. Even if your interpretation holds, which it doesn't, this is a procedural issue. The board will consult counsel and reissue filings as necessary. You won't, I said, because any action you take now triggers exposure liability under Title 4.32 of the Ridgemont Municipal Code. You knowingly enforce non-jurisdictional governance while in possession of contradictory internal records. Amy added, and I've preserved all those records, including timestamps, including minutes. Grant finally snapped. You were on this board, Amy. I still am, she said, and I won't be part of a fraud. He looked around the room, suddenly searching for allies, for someone who would save him with a gesture or excuse. But no one moved, not even the ones who had always nodded before. I walked toward the table and set the binder down gently in front of him. This is the full report. Every citation, every code, every map. The county inspector arrives in 4 days. Any fines issued or votes filed between now and then will be submitted with the complaint. Grant didn't look at it. He didn't have to, because he already knew. Melissa and I left the room together. No one stopped us. No one called after us. The door closed behind us with a hush. Outside, the air was still. The sky over Maple Oak Reserve was soft with evening light, but the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a structure gives way. And now, the structure had cracks too deep to patch. The next morning, I got 3 texts before sunrise. One was from Harold. Let me know when you need me to speak. One was from a homeowner 2 doors down. I've been paying illegal fines for 2 years. And one, anonymous number, simply read, check the HOA portal. I logged in immediately. The violation list for our address was gone, vanished overnight. No summary, no fine history. Just a blank space where active infractions used to be. But that wasn't an apology. That wasn't surrender. It was a quiet panic move. Someone trying to undo damage before the inspection report landed. Melissa saw the screen and crossed her arms. So, they think deleting the evidence makes them clean? They think it delays the fallout. But I'd already saved everything. Screenshots, timestamps, logged URLs. And now, I wasn't preparing a defense. I was preparing a file they couldn't ignore. It was time to bring in the inspector. Frank Holman arrived Monday morning, just past 10 a.m. County badge clipped to his chest, clipboard in hand, glasses fogging in the humidity. He didn't waste time on small talk. We walked the boundary line together, starting at the east sidewalk and ending at the base of the cast iron marker. You know, he said, kneeling to run his hand across the rusted edge. I read about this marker once. There was a case 10 years back. Someone tried to uproot one just like it for a development project. Judge ruled they were historical boundary fixtures. This one's been here since 1948, he nodded, and it still lines up, exactly. He pulled out a measuring device, then compared it to the parcel overlay app on his tablet. Everything on this side of the line falls under unincorporated Ridgemont, not HOA jurisdiction, unless the HOA filed an official annexation with both township approval and county record, which, based on what I've seen, they haven't. They haven't, I said. Holman stood and wiped his hands. You're outside their authority, no question. It wasn't celebratory, it was procedural, but that made it stronger. I sent him back with a full packet, including Amy's minutes, the neighbor testimonies, and the HOA's digital inconsistencies. He promised to expedite the review. Not because you pushed, he said, but because they were sloppy. And that was the heart of it. Grant wasn't just corrupt, he was careless. He'd built his power on assumptions and never once stopped to check if the land beneath him actually belonged to the board. That afternoon, I walked to each of the 5 houses on our block again. This time, not with folders, but with news. County inspector confirmed it, I told them. We're outside. I didn't ask them to act, I just told them the truth. And the thing about the truth is, it travels fast once it has proof. By evening, 2 homeowners had already submitted formal requests to have their addresses removed from the HOA registry. One threatened legal action for prior fines. Another demanded reimbursement for years of unauthorized surveillance from HOA patrols. Melissa stood in the kitchen doorway as I closed my laptop. "You're ready for Friday?" "That's the board meeting?" She nodded. "Public one, community-wide." It wasn't just a confrontation anymore, it was exposure. Grant would either step down quietly or fight with a sinking ship behind him. Amy called that night. Her voice was steadier now. "They know," she said. "They're trying to draft a statement, but Grant's still planning to defend it as a technical oversight. Does he understand the inspectors already confirmed the boundary? I don't think he understands anything except control." There was a pause. Then she added, "I'll speak on record Friday. If you're presenting, I'll confirm the internal vote logs and what he said." I almost didn't know what to say. "Thank you," I managed. "I'm not doing it for you," she said. "I'm doing it because I'm tired of looking the other way, and because Melissa deserves to stay in her home without being hunted." After we hung up, I stepped onto the porch. The air was cooler than usual. The marker stood quietly in the lawn, half buried in soft shadow, just where it had always been. It never moved. They had. And now, it was time to show everyone exactly where the line had always been. Friday came fast. The community room filled slower than usual, like people were hesitating at the door. But they came. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of fear of missing the fallout. Either way, by the time the meeting started, every folding chair was occupied. I stood near the back wall, binder in hand, watching it unfold like a court session with no judge. Melissa sat near the front. Amy was 2 chairs over, tablet already open in her lap. Her face was unreadable, but she wasn't hiding anymore. Grant entered 5 minutes late. He walked in like the floor still belonged to him, nodding as if the unease in the room were just nerves before a show. He carried a folder with far less confidence than the ones he used to wave around. The board members flanking him were quiet, eyes forward. No one joked, no one greeted him. He took the mic without ceremony. "We'll begin tonight with updates regarding compliance enforcement and boundary clarification requests submitted to the county." He cleared his throat. "There's been some misinformation spreading, understandable given the complexity of the issue, and I want to offer clarity before rumors do further harm to this community's unity." I raised my hand. He saw it. He didn't acknowledge it. "The board has reviewed recent claims," he continued, "and while we understand concerns raised regarding jurisdictional definitions, it is the board's position that our actions fall within a historically accepted interpretation of the Maple Oak Charter." I didn't wait for recognition. I stepped forward. "You received confirmation from the zoning inspector 2 days ago. County review confirmed our property is outside the HOA's legal authority. The 5 parcels in question were never annexed." Grant tightened his grip on the mic. "We're aware of the inspector's report, but that report has not yet been certified." Amy stood. Her voice cut through the tension like a snapped wire. "You told us in February that certification didn't matter, that presence within the gates was enough." The room shifted. She continued, voice stronger now. You admitted to proceeding without filing boundary corrections. You dismissed concerns as symbolic disputes. I have the minutes, I logged the votes, I time-stamped the objections. Grant turned red. This is an internal matter. Not anymore, she said. I stepped beside her. You fined us, blocked access, tried to initiate a lien, all without legal authority. And now, 5 homeowners have filed for disassociation. 1 has already received confirmation. You're not losing control of the board, Grant. You already lost control of the truth. A woman in the 3rd row, someone I didn't know, raised her hand slowly. Are our fines real? She asked, not accusing, just confused. My husband and I paid over $3,000 last year in violation fees. Are those even enforceable? Grant's mouth opened, then closed. Another voice from the back. Do we get reimbursed? Then another. Can we vote him out? And just like that, the authority Grant had worn like armor began to peel away, layer by layer, in plain sight. He tried to speak again, but it came out fractured. These things take time. Legal review is... You had time, Harold said, standing at the back of the room. You had all the time in the world, to be honest, and you used it to threaten people. Amy didn't move. She didn't look at Grant. She just turned to the board chair beside him and said calmly, I move for a vote of no confidence in the acting president of this HOA. Silence, then, seconded. The motion passed in under 3 minutes. Grant didn't yell. He didn't argue. He walked out of the room with the folder still in his hand, like he didn't know what to do with it anymore, like it was just a piece of paper that no longer meant anything. I stayed until the room cleared. People whispered. Some apologized. Others simply nodded as they left, the kind of nod that doesn't ask for conversation, only respect. Melissa joined me at the front. We didn't speak. Amy gathered her things in silence, but as she walked past us, she paused. I hope you stay, she said. We were never leaving, Melissa replied, and this time no one told. Us, we had to. The rain started before sunrise, soft, steady, and unshakable. It clung to the sidewalks and rooftops like a second skin. I watched it from the porch, coffee cooling in my hand, as the cast iron marker glistened under the weight of the weather. It didn't look cleaner. It looked older and prouder. The community meeting had ended with Grant walking out and Amy calling for a special session. But today was something different. Today was the public review, an open forum hosted by the county inspector and Ridgemont's municipal liaison. Anyone could attend. Everyone had questions, especially now. Melissa and I arrived early. The event space had been borrowed from the public library across town, a glass-walled room with long tables, wire microphones, and no place to hide. Already neighbors were trickling in, coats wet, eyes sharp. Even those who never showed up for anything were there, silent, tired of being quiet. Frank Holman from the zoning office was seated at the front, going over his paperwork. He'd brought everything: satellite overlays, parcel audits, signed statements, legal weight, laminated and labeled. Amy walked in shortly after, not alone this time. 2 other board members followed, not looking at her but not avoiding her either. Something had shifted between them since the vote. She no longer sat off to the side. She took the center chair and opened her tablet without hesitation. Grant didn't show, not at first, but halfway through the introductions, just as Holman began outlining the review criteria, the door opened and in he walked, alone, no folder, no blazer, just a soaked windbreaker and a face that looked like it had aged 10 years since the last meeting. No one stood, no one greeted him. But the room felt colder when he entered. Holman began. He walked the audience through the township boundary maps, the original HOA charter, the amendments that were never certified, the zoning gaps that had gone unnoticed or unchallenged for over 2 decades. Then he clicked to the slide that showed the marker. My marker. The one Melissa's father guarded like a family heirloom. The one that had survived bad storms, careless lawn crews, and Grant's measuring tape. This marker, Holman said, is legally recognized as a jurisdictional indicator under Ridgemont's boundary code. The parcel it sits on, and 5 adjacent parcels, are not under the governance of the Maple Oak Reserve Homeowners Association. This has been verified by both city and county GIS divisions. Murmurs rippled through the room, some gasps, some curses under breath. Amy spoke next. In light of this confirmation, she said, The board has initiated full withdrawal of all pending enforcement actions against those properties. Furthermore, we will suspend all fines issued to them over the past 12 months, pending refund review. A man near the front raised his hand. Does that mean we've been paying into something that didn't even have a right to bill us? Amy didn't dodge. Yes, and we're preparing a list of overages. Someone else stood. Why did it take Marcus Bell doing all the work for this to come out? Holman answered that. Because the HOA operated unchecked for years, and no one asked the right questions, until now. All eyes turned toward me. I didn't stand. I didn't want the floor. But Melissa touched my hand, and that was enough. I didn't do this to be right, I said. I did it because I saw someone trying to erase the boundary between influence and law. That line matters, not just for me, for everyone. From the back, Harold called out, "Then maybe it's time we redraw some other lines too." Applause wasn't loud, but it was real. Holman closed the session with instructions for refund claims and contact info for disassociation paperwork. The meeting ended without drama, without a scene. But outside, as people scattered beneath umbrellas and puddles, Grant stood near the edge of the parking lot, alone, watching the marker photo on the projector fade from the room like a slow exhale. He didn't speak to anyone, didn't raise a hand. He just turned, got in his car, and drove away. And as the engine disappeared into the mist, I knew. That was the last time he'd ever set foot near our home again. The rain lingered for 2 more days, like the sky was washing something out of the neighborhood we no longer owed anything to. I stood on the porch with Melissa as the clouds began to break. The cast iron marker stood at the edge of our lawn, wet, unmoved, exactly where her father had left it. We hadn't touched it during the battle. We didn't need to. It held its place the same way we held ours, quietly, until the storm passed. A week after the public hearing, official letters arrived. One for each of the 6 households the county confirmed were outside HOA jurisdiction. No fines, no liens, no record of governance. Just a short paragraph that read like both a confirmation and an apology. Melissa held hers in both hands for a long time before folding it down the middle. She didn't file it. She didn't frame it. She tucked it into her father's old toolbox under the kitchen counter. Not for proof, for peace. The HOA board restructured 2 days later. Grant resigned for personal reasons. No statement, no farewell. Just a blank chair at the next meeting. Amy was voted interim president by a unanimous vote. She texted me that night. "It feels like I'm standing in the wreckage of a fire I helped feed." I told her the truth. No one builds anything real without burning away what was false first. She didn't reply. But the next morning, she hand-delivered a check to Melissa. Full refund, down to the dollar. No envelope, no excuses. By the end of the month, the rest of the block had formally disassociated. The HOA's influence shrank by nearly 15%. They rewrote the charter again, this time with oversight. But for us, the house never changed. Not once. Not during the fights, not during the silence that followed. The swing still creaked the same way. The porch still caught the sun just before dusk. The old oak out back still held onto leaves longer than any other tree in the street. It was always the others who tried to move the line. We just reminded them where it had been the whole time. Melissa planted tulips along the base of the marker in early spring, a quiet kind of defiance. Roots where they tried to draw borders, flowers where they tried to post warnings. One morning, Harold stopped by with an envelope. Inside was a photo, black and white, slightly warped. 2 men standing next to the cast iron marker, dirt on their hands, pride in their posture. "My grandfather and hers," he said, nodding toward Melissa in the kitchen. "Didn't know I had it until I cleaned out an old lockbox. Figured it belonged here more than anywhere else." We framed it that evening and hung it above the table where I had built the binder, line by line. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. That history has weight, and sometimes it pushes back. Now the neighbors who once looked away offer nods that last a little longer. Not everyone approves, not everyone speaks, but no one forgets, not anymore. They remember the time someone said, "Vacate immediately," and someone else refused. They remember the man who wasn't on the registry, who had no vote, no seat, no voice in their meetings, and still outmaneuvered them all. They remember that a line, once properly drawn, doesn't need a fence to defend it. It just needs someone willing to stand on it. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.